What if I told you a 31-year-old sprinter, written off by almost everyone, just ran a time so shocking that people watching live thought the scoreboard had glitched? No false alarm, no camera trick, just one man turning back the clock in a way track and field hasn't seen in years. Stick with me, because this story has everything. A fall from grace, a slow climb back, and one night in Austria that changed the entire conversation around him. Let's rewind for a second, because the backstory is what makes this moment hit so hard. In 2021, at the Tokyo Olympics, an Italian sprinter named Lamont Marcell Jacobs did something nobody saw coming. He won Olympic gold in the 100 meters, clocking 9.8 seconds and setting a new European record in the process. It was one of the biggest surprises in modern sprinting history, and overnight, Jacobs became a household name in Italy and beyond. Then the wheels came off. Injury after injury piled up. Season after season, he couldn't even break the 10-second barrier, a benchmark that separates the merely good from the truly elite. Fans who had celebrated his Olympic breakthrough started to wonder if that golden night in Tokyo was a peak he'd never touch again. The whispers got louder. Maybe he was finished. Maybe injuries had taken too much. Maybe the sport had simply moved on without him. And then 2026 arrived, and something shifted. At a Diamond League meet in Rome, running in front of his home crowd, Jacobs cracked 10 seconds again for the first time in ages, crossing the line in 9.99. It wasn't a blistering time by elite standards, but symbolically, it was massive. It meant the engine still worked. It meant health was returning. A few weeks later in Paris, he looked even sharper, finishing third in 9.96, trailing only Noah Lyles and Trayvon Bromell, two of the best sprinters on the planet. 2 races, 2 signs of life. The comeback was quietly building momentum, but nothing could have prepared anyone for what happened next at the Rafison Austrian Open. Before we even get to Jacobs, the qualifying rounds alone were absurd. In the opening heats, Wade van Niekerk, Owen Anna, and Romel Glave all dipped under 10 seconds, with Glave sneaking under 9.9. The catch? A strong tailwind, over 3 meters per second in both heats, meant none of those times would count officially. Wind-aided runs don't go into the record books, but they still tell you everything about how sharp these athletes were on the day. And there was something particularly special about Van Niekerk's run. The last time he'd gone sub-10 in any conditions was 2017, 9 years earlier. This is a man best known as the world record holder in the 400 meters, so watching him fly in the short sprint again was its own headline. Then came Heat 3, and Jacobs made his statement early. Off the gun, he grabbed a strong start and immediately began pulling clear of the field. By the second half of the race, he wasn't just leading. He was extending the gap, eventually crossing the line in 9.84 and winning by nearly half a second. At this level, against some of the fastest men alive, a margin like that is almost unheard of. Once again, wind played a factor, though this time it was a smaller boost of plus 2.3 meters per second, just over the legal threshold. Strip the wind away entirely, and that run translates to somewhere around 9.93. Even at the maximum legal wind reading, it still comes out to roughly 9.85. However you adjust it, the conclusion was the same. Jacobs looked like a man rediscovering his prime. So heading into the final, the question on everyone's mind was obvious. Could he actually break back into sub-9.8 territory, the zone that made him an Olympic champion in the first place? The final delivered an answer nobody expected. At the start, it looked like a two-man fight between Romel Glave and Jacobs, running shoulder to shoulder with barely a fraction of daylight between them. Van Niekerk and a Japanese sprinter named Yoshihide Kiryu stayed within striking distance too, refusing to fade. But somewhere in that last stretch, the final 20, 30 meters where legs usually start to betray even the best athletes, Jacobs found another gear entirely. When he crossed the line, the stadium clock flashed a number that looked almost fictional, 9.66. The confirmed official time settled at 9.67 seconds, a staggering personal best, and one of the fastest 100-meter times ever recorded by a human being, under any conditions, at any point in history. He wasn't racing in a vacuum, either. Glave ran 9.76. Van Niekerk ran 9.83. Kiryu crossed in 9.99. It was, top to bottom, one of the fastest fields ever assembled outside a global championship final. Now, The twist that was probably inevitable given everything else that day, the wind. This time it was blowing at a massive plus 4.1 meters per second, nowhere close to legal. So officially, that 9.67 won't slot into the record books as the second fastest time in history behind Usain Bolt. It can't. Wind that strong disqualifies it from ever being ratified. But unofficially, under any conditions, wind legal or not, it stands as the second fastest 100 meters ever run by anyone, anywhere. That places him just ahead of Tyson Gay's 9.68, run at the 2008 U.S. Olympic trials. And in an almost eerie coincidence, Gay ran that time under the exact same wind reading, plus 4.1. Same conditions, 17 years apart, and Jacobs edged it by a single hundredth of a second. Here's the part that should genuinely excite anyone following this sport. Jacobs is 31 years old. Not long ago, plenty of people had quietly written him off, assuming his body simply couldn't handle elite sprinting anymore, that Tokyo would remain a beautiful, unrepeatable moment frozen in 2021. This run in Austria says otherwise. And there's real reason for optimism looking forward, too. Remember that Tyson-Gay comparison? The year after Gay ran his wind-aided 9.68, he backed it up with a fully legal 9.71. History suggests that when a sprinter shows this kind of raw speed, even wind-aided, a legitimate breakthrough often isn't far behind. It's entirely possible Jacobs is on the verge of dipping under 9.8 again in conditions that actually count. Before moving on, it's worth tipping the cap to everyone else in that final. Glave's 9.76 was outstanding in almost any other context. Van Niekerk's 9.83 confirmed he's fully back to form. And Kiryu's sub-10 finish showed he's still very much a factor on the world stage. So where does this leave Jacobs heading into the rest of the season? A few months ago, the narrative around him was simple: a fallen champion trying, and mostly failing, to recapture something that might already be gone. That narrative doesn't hold anymore. Every race this year has been faster than the last. 9.99 in Rome, 9.96 in Paris, and now a jaw-dropping 9.67 in Austria. That's not random variance. That's a trajectory. And when a former Olympic champion starts trending upward like that, every other sprinter in the world takes notice, because it changes who they have to worry about at the next big meet. Nobody knows for certain what comes next. Maybe there's a legal sub-9.8 run waiting just around the corner. Maybe there's a real shot at fighting for medals again on the sport's biggest stages. What's clear is this: after Austria, nobody is writing Lamont Marcell Jacobs off anymore. The comeback isn't a story people are hoping for. It's already happening.